Well, that was a good day of racing and qualifying at Silverstone. Great F3, great F2. And I think if there were going to be two elements to Formula One that you'd want to improve or hope for this weekend in the 70th anniversary Grand Prix weekend, they would be one, Valtteri Bottas starting from the pole to make it a race with Lewis. And if you start from the pole when tyre wear, tyre deg is an issue, which of course it is at the moment because Pirelli have got the softer compound across the range and longevity of stints is going to be critical, then being in front, looking after your tyres, being able to look after your tyres slightly better is obviously an advantage. So that was one thing. And the other was Racing Point. Where were they? Are they going to be up somewhere near Red Bull where they appeared to be in Austria and Hungary? And if they were, that would make it a more interesting race for P3. And we have both of those today. Mercedes went out in the final run for Q3 on the soft tyre, and you thought, wow, this is a big showdown. But then both came in and they put the medium tyre on, which is supposedly slightly slower, but as quick, if not quicker, as George Russell said after his run. And it was Valtteri that got it just by a hair over Lewis. And, you know, what does that mean? That means Lewis is not perfect by any means. It also means that Valtteri has this ability, which we've spoken about in the past, on one lap, really good set of tyres, good balance, he's really, really quick. And as I said a couple of videos ago, I think he's braking better from high speed than I've ever seen him brake this year. And that showed up in Austria. And he got the pole. So whether he can, well, I mean, being in front and looking after the tyres is probably a bigger factor than the difference between Valtteri and Lewis when it comes to some of the variables that come into play tomorrow, like tyre deg or crosswinds or grip changes on the track. Being in front will give Valtteri, in theory, if assuming he makes a good start, which of course is a big if, he will be in position to look after his tyres. So that's one thing, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the race. It's a good thing for Formula One as well. And it shows, of course, that Lewis isn't perfect any more than anybody in the world is perfect. That's one thing. And secondly, what a week it's been for Racing Point, with the news coming out that their brake ducts are legally illegal, if that's the right thing. That's the title, I think, that we gave the video when it was all talked about yesterday. And that's a weird thing, isn't it? And a lot of the teams now are protesting that decision on the basis that if they're illegal, they shouldn't be on the car at all. But the FIA made it clear in their written report that it would be too much to ask Racing Point to redesign the brake ducts for this race or future races, which I disagree with, to be honest. I think, you know, you don't do something like that unless you look at all the potential downsides, and there are bright enough people at Racing Point to know that maybe these things were going to be a matter of contention, and probably they do have an alternative design tucked away anyway. Any team worth its salt would have done that by now. So it's odd that they are allowed to run them, but because they're allowed to run them, because they got that confidence, and because Nico Hulkenberg's had 10 days since he sat in the car now, his body's had time to adapt. Obviously he hasn't been able to build up the muscle strength, but the body is an amazing thing. If you drive a Formula One car for the first time and you're quick, after 10 laps your neck will go, your arms will go, shoulders, whatever. If you then get out of the car and go back the next day, it's amazing how the body's adapted, even without going to the gym or building up the muscles. And I think that's what we're seeing with Nico. And believe me, if tomorrow, by any reason, for any reason, both Mercedes have problems and Nico doesn't, and he's in a position to win that race, he won't even feel his neck problems. It won't be an issue at all. And that's not stretching reality too far. You know, stranger things have happened. So really pleased for Nico Hulkenberg, pleased for Tom McCullough particularly. I mentioned before he would have been instrumental in getting Nico into that car. There were other drivers they could have looked at, and but it was Nico they went for. And Tom's got all that history with Nico that goes back to that pole in the Brazilian Grand Prix. A lot of unfinished business in terms of Nico's career. So to see that happen today, what a feeling of satisfaction Tom and Nico would have had with that P3. Brilliant. Good to see Daniel Ricciardo continuing the momentum by showing lots of pace. Also Lando Norris, excellent at McLaren again. Can't speak too highly of Lando, really. I mean, he's just doing a superb job. And as predicted, kind of showing up Carlos Sainz because Carlos is a sort of Romain Grosjean-esque reflexy driver who can do a very, very quick lap, and he's got a great personality, but he's not the all-round package that Lando is in terms of manipulating the car and getting the car to be in a position in which you need it in order to be ready for the variables, and that's what Lando does so well. As for, Charles Leclerc did another very good job. I think for sure got the best out of the Ferrari, which of course we can't say for Sebastian Vettel. I've got a bit of flack over the last couple of months, from the moment indeed that it was announced that Vettel was leaving for Ferrari, for saying kind of it was his own fault for not digging deep, being more self-critical and adapting and working on his driving to the point where he can be really quick in a car which doesn't have a great back end. And I still think that's the case, and I think that's where Charles Leclerc's got it over him at the moment. And I think that showed up yet again today, didn't it? Sebastian at the end of all that was completely lost as to why he was so slow. From his perspective of the world, he's a 4 times world champion that drove an almost perfect lap, as good a lap as he could drive in that car, and yet he's still 4/10 slower than Charles Leclerc and really, really struggling. And that all comes down to not knowing how he drives relative to other people and what can be done with the car. And it's nothing to do with data. It's nothing to do with looking at all the numbers on a readout. It's all to do with all those little gaps between the numbers and how Charles uses the car, how he warns the car what's going to happen next, and how Sebastian is just what he is, very, very quick, reflexy, great car control, V-style driver, and he's been that driver throughout his career from the minute I first saw him testing on Fridays. I remember Sebastian, we were watching, I was with Matthew Marsh, a friend of mine, we were watching at the Degnas at Suzuka, which are 2 quick right-handers, sort of negative camber falling away initially, and we were watching Sebastian on one of those early Fridays before he'd even had his first Grand Prix, and he came into one of them and the back end just got away, and he was just absolutely brilliant. Just one of those incredible reflexes in car control. But that's different from manipulating a car to make it work when he doesn't have grip at the rear. Just reacting to an oversteer flick is not the same thing as being quick in a racing car. He has all that car control and reflexes, and it took him to the World Championship 4 times, and he beat Mark Webber on those occasions, but he didn't beat Daniel Ricciardo in his last year at Red Bull, and I think that was very telling. Sounds a bit negative, but what can you say? I think when you're beaten by your teammate like that, you have to be it's time to wake up, isn't it, really? So yeah, good win for Callum Ilott in the F2 race. Excellent win for Callum Ilott. I thought he could have made lots of mistakes, didn't. Won from the pole, and he won really well from the pole. So good drive for him. Very good Christian Lundgaard as well, ART, and Jack Aitken overperforming really in the Campos to finish 3rd in the F2 race today. And Formula 3 was good too. Lots more action tomorrow, but in the meantime, very pleased that Valtteri's on the pole. And for the sake of the motor race, I'm pleased that Racing Point obviously are quick. Max Verstappen did a really good job to qualify in Q2 on the hard tyre, so that will make everybody think a little bit. And hopefully he will have a longer first stint, and it might move things around a bit. If you're Red Bull, you've got to take that gamble, and Max was up to the challenge. Not easy to qualify top 10 in Q2 on that hard tyre, but he did it, and he will have hopefully some reward tomorrow. So yeah, see you then.